so.
Okay. Okay. So, it was my sophomore year of high school, and I always wanted to get away from my parents, so I begged them to let me go to the trip with the ROTC. And the trip was went from Kentucky to Texas, but I went to Kentucky the year before, and then that following year I went to Texas. So we woke up around 6 o'clock in the morning. We had to be on the bus around 8. We had to get into formation, where we have 2 ranks depending on how many people came, and then we had to state our names. We had to make sure that our petty officer was there before we lined up, and we were on the bus around 8 o'clock. But what I did not know that we had to go to another school. So we took another hour and traveled to the school, and we waited for their petty officer, which came late, and that was around 10 o'clock. So we didn't leave for Texas until about 12:30. So it was a little aggravating. So when we finally got on the bus, the trip took about 12 and a half hours. And we had minimal breaks. So imagine yourself sitting on the bus with teenagers forever. It's hard. Anyway, so we finally arrived there, and they put us in this big fancy Hilton hotel, and it was about 42 rooms, and we stayed in Dallas. We didn't have any time to travel or anything. That was just our resting spot for the night. So we all went out to dinner, and after we went out to dinner, it was time for us to come back to go to freshen up and go to sleep until the morning time, which was around 8 o'clock, when we traveled to Houston. We traveled to Houston, and we saw the different types of military bases. I think it was about 2 that we saw. We saw this gigantic tank. It was used for wars, so it was really big. We couldn't get into it because they were like, "Oh, this is military property. This is government property." But a lot of the boys wanted to jump in the tank and take a picture of it, so they allowed us just to stand near it or to stand on it. So I never understood the purpose of not standing in it if we already standing on it. So we went there, and then we met a lot of petty officers, first class, second class, third class, and they already retired from the military, naval, and then we traveled to one Army base. The Army base was a little scary because it had a lot of equipment, like explosives and boxes, and you saw the soldiers in formation and doing push-ups, and it was fun. It was a vacation for me, so I didn't really complain, but it was extremely hot. It was extremely hot, about 98 in the morning. So, yeah, and then imagine what it was in the afternoon. So after we went there, we stayed in Houston for about 3 days. Trip in itself was a week long. So almost every day we traveled to another city in Texas. And we finally arrived at San Antonio. And when we arrived at San Antonio, that's where I saw the ship. It's a huge ship, very huge. And the story behind it was that it took about over 200 women only to build the ship from ground up, and they fought on it, and no men were allowed. This is the this was one of the first ships that were built by women. And there's a story told that it was haunted because a few of the women died in the ship. And so you can see some of the sailors that were really dusty. They never cleaned the areas. They only fixed the broken pieces, like broken pipes and everything. And you seen the bars where they kept the prisoners in when they captured them, and it was really rusted, and it was this dark tunnel, I remember, and they had minimum lighting, and they told us to bring flashlights, and they told us late at night when you're sleeping you can hear someone's howling or screaming at night, so a lot of the boys would run and